If you like real stories where toxic workplaces and lazy coworkers get quietly sabotaged, tap like and subscribe to Scorned Stories so YouTube keeps bringing you more. On my last day at a job that treated IT like garbage, I remembered I still had admin access, while one of the workstations was blasting political news instead of, work. So I used my credentials to block all their favorite sites, and months later they're still complaining they can't work because those pages won't load. Here's how it happened. I live in the Midwest, and at my previous job I was the project manager for the site and ran the facilities. One of my closest friends there was in IT. He was head of cybersecurity and licenses, while I handled the building, equipment, and a lot of the day-to-day operations. Because we had government contracts, we had to work together constantly. Visitors had to be vetted and logged, and sometimes we needed to set up key fobs so they could enter the facility. I would collect vendor information and pass it to him so he could run checks and assign permissions. On top of that, I was often upgrading systems on site or installing new monitoring equipment, things like the solar panel monitoring, environmental systems, that kind of stuff. That meant I had to install software not only on my own computer but also on specific workstations out on the floor. Before this job, I'd worked as a government contractor. I'd had a top-secret clearance and had done IT management before, so I spoke the language and understood the security requirements. That was a big selling point when I got hired. IT could actually trust me, and I had contacts they could lean on. So my IT friend and I worked really well together. We spoke the same technical language, understood each other's constraints, and both wanted things done properly. The company did not share that attitude. Unlike any other place I'd worked, this company absolutely hated IT. They treated them like the red-headed stepchild of the business. IT was always getting in the way, slowing production, and adding pointless rules. They saw them as a burden, not as people keeping them from getting hacked or shut down. They gave IT the tiniest budget I'd ever seen. They ignored their recommendations. They overworked them constantly, making them come in on weekends or stay late with the attitude of, "Well, that's why you're salaried." I sympathized with them. Hard. So I did what I could to help. If a new access point needed to be installed, I'd take the scissors lift and do it myself. If we needed a long Ethernet run, say, 100 yards from the roof to the hub, I'd pull the cable. Anything to take some of the load off. Because of that trust and my background, my friend eventually gave me administrator access. The idea was, if a mission-critical workstation went down while he was stuck in some 3-hour meeting or compliance training, I could log in as admin, reboot, install a driver, or do basic troubleshooting instead of shutting down production and waiting for IT to be allowed to help. The company had wisely tied certain pieces of equipment to specific workstations. If that one machine crashed, that whole part of the line stopped. It was much easier and faster for me to log in with admin credentials and fix it than to page IT, have them fight management to leave a meeting, and then run across the building. So for a while, I used the admin login fairly regularly and very responsibly. Then my friend left for another job across the country, and life at work moved on. Eventually, I stopped needing the admin account. Other priorities took over, and honestly, I forgot I even had the credentials. As facilities manager, I was usually the last person out of the building every day. The production workers had a bad habit of leaving every light on. The owner of the company hated that. It was easier for me to just stay 20 minutes past the end of my shift, turn off lights, lock up, and make sure the place wasn't burning down. My last day was no different. Almost. I was doing my normal closing rounds when I heard voices. That was unusual. Normally by that point, it was just me and the hum of the building. I followed the sound and found one of the workstations out on the floor wide open. User logged in, browser up, speakers blaring. On one tab was Fox News. On another tab was Newsmax. Employees had been warned about this sort of thing many times. You're not supposed to be streaming news or watching videos at a production workstation. This wasn't one guy checking a headline at lunch. This was someone clearly treating the computer like their personal TV in the middle of shift. And to make it extra perfect, the person whose station it was had been a complete jerk to me. I felt a small, evil idea creeping up. Then I remembered, I still had admin access. I sat down, opened the browser settings, and started blocking those news sites. Then I got curious. I walked over to another workstation, checked the browsing history. Same pattern, same sites, same bad habits. So I used the admin credentials to block those sites there too. Then I went to another workstation. And another. By the time I was done, every workstation in that specific plant had the same restrictions. They could not access the political news sites people had been using instead of working. And here's the fun part. Those workstations didn't log in with individual usernames and passwords. They were generic, department-level accounts with blanket passwords anyone in that area knew. So there was no clear trail to a single person using them, and no way to tell which specific operator had been goofing off at which moment. The administrator credentials were also a generic username and password. They weren't tied to any single employee either. When my IT friend left, nobody came back and removed my access. Nobody updated the admin password. Nobody audited who had what permissions. Keycards for the building only logged inbound, not outbound. It wasn't unusual for someone to still be around late finishing a job. IT staff were often some of the last people to leave, too. There were no cameras in the facility. So from a logging perspective, here's what they had. A generic admin account used at some point in the evening, on several machines, to change web access settings. No individual user tied to it. No camera. No unique workstation user. And the one guy who knew I had access? He was long gone to another state. Good luck proving it wasn't one of the remaining IT staff, or admitting to upper management that there had been a security blind spot this big. Then I quit. Honestly, I completely forgot I'd done any of this. Life moved on. I started a new chapter. Months later, one of the plant managers texted me out of the blue. We'd had a snowstorm the night before, and the solar panels on the roof were acting up. He wanted to know how to reboot the monitoring system. I walked him through it, because I liked him as a person. I wasn't helping the company. I was helping him keep his shift running. We started catching up. I asked how the skeleton crew on weekends was working out. He said it was fine overall, but they'd been dealing with what he called a glitch in the matrix for a few months. Because of winter slowdowns and tariffs, a lot of the weekend crew had been laid off. They were down to 3 people on weekends. They were managing, but the big complaint from the weekend shift was that they couldn't use certain websites anymore. Every time they tried to pull up their usual news sites, they got blocked. IT had been told about it. But IT was still understaffed, still overworked, and this was just the weekend crew complaining that they couldn't watch news at their stations. Compared to real production issues and security tickets, that was a very low priority. So nobody rushed to fix it. Meanwhile, the more people complained about it, the more they were exposing themselves. Management was slowly catching on that the only people who cared about this glitch were the ones who clearly weren't focusing on their jobs. If you're loudly mad that you can't stream news on a machine that's supposed to be running product, you're basically admitting you're not actually paying attention to your work. I realized while he was talking that the glitch they'd been fighting was my little parting gift. Months later, they're still locked out of those sites at the workstations. IT is annoyed but busy. The company doesn't see it as urgent. And any employee who complains too hard about it risks drawing attention to the fact they were using company equipment to watch news instead of doing the job they're paid for. To me, that's a win-win. The company that treated IT like dirt now has a low-key enforcement mechanism they don't even know about. The overworked IT staff don't have to waste time fixing something that only slacking employees care about. And the people who love to prop their feet up and stream political news at their stations quietly lost their favorite toy. All because I remembered on my last night that I still had the keys to the kingdom. If you enjoyed hearing about a quiet, petty revenge that keeps paying off months later, tap like and subscribe to Scorned Stories for more true tales of workplace drama, revenge and karma.